Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Imagine being pushed aside for years by a cold stepfather, only for your mother to suddenly come back desperate, begging you to save her from prison. In the dead of night, a message appears on your screen from the person you thought you'd never hear from again: "Son, I need you." All the buried emotions, shattered childhood memories, silent tears from your mother, and the harsh stares from Rick flood back like a storm. When you've lost your room, your family, and your trust, can forgiveness still mean anything, or is it just another wound to your pride? What would you do if the mother who once abandoned you suddenly returned, using your love and kindness to cover up her darkest mistakes? Today's story is about the thin line between family, pain, and betrayal. Ready to dive in? Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and let's begin this untold drama together. It's strange. The way certain memories linger, refusing to fade, like the chill that clings to your skin long after you've left the snow behind. I remember the early mornings when the world still felt safe. Just me, my mom, and the golden light pooling in our cramped kitchen. She'd sing softly while flipping pancakes, and I believed, just for those moments, that we were unbreakable. But behind those ordinary mornings, shadows gathered. I was only 5 when my parents' shouting matches began to drown out the sound of cartoons. The divorce itself didn't come as a surprise. What broke me was the way blame seemed to seep into every corner of our lives, my grandparents choosing sides, neighbors whispering behind half-closed doors. My mother put on a brave face, but I could see the exhaustion etched in her eyes each night, after working double shifts just to keep us afloat. Visits with my dad, the architect, became my lifeline. The days we'd escape to construction sites, or build model airplanes at his small apartment. He'd promise, "We'll always figure things out, kiddo." Back home, though, loneliness crept in. My mom was my anchor, but she was slowly slipping away, lost in adult worries and silent tears she thought I didn't see. When Rick entered our world, everything changed. He arrived with forced charm, offering gifts, cracking jokes that never quite landed. At first, my mom smiled more. There were even rare nights of laughter at dinner, with Rick cooking his world-famous chili and my mother pretending it wasn't too salty. But soon, that laughter was replaced by a new kind of tension. Rick, towering, opinionated, found ways to make me feel small without ever raising his voice. Suddenly, it felt like I was an intruder in my own home. Conversations grew shorter. My mom started hiding her bruised wrists under long cardigans, insisting she was just clumsy. Even my best friend from down the street, Jamie, noticed how withdrawn I'd become. He'd shoot me a worried look at the bus stop, asking if things were okay. But what could I say? My family is falling apart? That the woman who once promised the world was now letting a stranger chip away at everything we'd built? The real heartbreak was noticing the shift in my mother, the way she'd let Rick's words bruise her spirit, the way her hugs became less frequent. And in those nights when the fighting was worst, I'd find myself hiding in my room, headphones pressed tight, praying for escape. But the walls in that little house weren't thick enough to keep out the pain. Sometimes, my grandmother, her own life shaped by resilience, would stop by with homemade cookies and stern advice: families go through storms, but you hold on to the ones you love, no matter how hard it gets. Yet even she, strong and steady, seemed powerless against the growing rift. Looking back, I see a childhood marked not just by the love I so desperately chased, but also by a slow dawning realization: not all wounds are visible. Some are built day by day, in the rooms where you're no longer welcome, in the silence that creeps in the eyes that look away when you need them most. By the time I reached my teens, I'd learned to keep secrets. I found comfort in books, late-night walks, and the rare weekends with my dad. Each visit was a fleeting oasis, a reminder of what family could be, if only I could bring both halves together. But home had become a shadow of itself. And so had I. As the years passed, the resentments grew, each one deepening the cracks that would one day shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. And that, right there, was just the beginning. The day Rick truly entered our lives, the seeds of resentment were sown, and everything changed. But what happens when love turns into survival, and those you trust most become strangers in your own home? It's wild how quickly a stranger can turn your whole world upside down. Rick didn't explode into our lives, he crept in, sly and calculated, at first donning the mask of a caring boyfriend who just wanted to help. I was 15 when Mom introduced him at a family barbecue. She looked different that day, not just happy, but almost desperate for someone to notice. My Aunt Linda, always the sharp observer, whispered to me, "He's got salesman eyes, honey. Watch out." I didn't know what she meant then, but I would soon. For a brief moment, Rick played the part perfectly, bringing flowers for Mom, cracking dad jokes that fell flat, showing off his grilling skills. He even tried to bond with me, force conversation about baseball and college, giving me a set of keys for a motorcycle I'd never seen. He claimed it was a gesture of trust, but everyone knows trust can't be bought with gifts, can it? Soon after that sunny afternoon, Rick moved in. And things changed fast. At first, it was subtle. Mom started rearranging our furniture, changing the family recipes, updating her wardrobe. "Rick thinks we should try something new," she'd say, forcing a little laugh, her old sparkle flickering out. He installed new rules around the house: shoes off at all times, chores assigned on a strict whiteboard schedule. Suddenly, I was getting scolded for things I'd always done, listening to music too loud, leaving dishes in the sink for 5 minutes, even calling my dad for too long in my own room. Arguments became a nightly ritual. Sometimes it was over my grades, sometimes over nothing at all. Rick's voice would rise, and when it did, Mom would shrink, her eyes glued to the floor. My little cousin Zoe, who visited on weekends, once caught Rick snarling at me for the way I answered the door. She never came over again after that. I can't blame her. With each passing week, the house felt less like home, more like Rick's kingdom. Even Grandma tried to intervene, inviting me over for sleepovers and asking if everything was all right. I'd always brush her off, but the truth was, I never felt safe enough to tell anyone what was happening. My old friend Jamie noticed the change in me too. My jokes vanished in school, my grades slipped, and instead of invitations, I just wanted to be left alone. Rick would go through my stuff, rearrange my books, throw out my dad's old photos from the hallway. Once, I found my favorite childhood drawing ripped up in the trash. When I asked, Rick just shrugged. "It was clutter, kid. Grow up." Mom barely reacted, she just looked tired, worn down by 1,000 tiny battles she knew she couldn't win. But what cut the deepest was Mom herself. She used to defend me, even when I was wrong. Now, she'd glance nervously at Rick before saying anything, as if asking for permission. Sometimes I'd see her sitting in her car outside after work, just breathing, fighting tears, dreading what was inside. I started escaping into small freedoms, late walks at midnight, long calls with Dad, or even just staying extra hours at school to avoid coming home. But no matter how far I tried to run, Rick's influence stretched further. The betrayal wasn't just Rick's presence, it was Mom's slow disappearance, her quiet acceptance, her decision to stay silent when I needed her most. I felt like I was grieving not just for the home I'd lost, but for the mother who'd once promised to never let anyone hurt me. That's how resentment quietly took root. Every cruel word left unsaid, every sidelong glance, every door quietly closed. By the end of that first year with Rick, I wasn't just angry, I was hollow, walking through a house that no longer remembered my name. In those lonely months, I started to realize, sometimes, survival means letting go of old dreams and facing the hard truth, that not everyone you love will stand up for you. And sometimes, the only way to hold on to yourself is to walk away from the people who broke you. But the breaking was far from over. If I thought losing the feeling of home was painful, nothing could prepare me for the moment Rick took away the last space that was truly mine, my room. And that's where everything truly fell apart. Some moments rearrange your life in an instant: one slammed door, one broken promise, one final straw that snaps the thread you've been clutching to for so long. For me, it happened quietly, without the drama you'd expect. It started the day I came home from college, suitcase in hand, ready to reclaim what tiny bit of childhood I had left: a room, a memory, the comfort of 4 familiar walls. Except when I opened the door, I was greeted by a total stranger. There, in the space I'd painted as a little kid, the place I kept all my hopes and private dreams, was a man I'd never met, Rick's new tenant. Suitcases lined the wall where my old posters had hung. My trophies and books were gone, replaced by faded boxes and the faint smell of someone else's cologne. It was like walking into a stranger's life, as if I'd already been erased. I remember standing frozen, waiting for my mom to say it was a mistake, to laugh and promise there was room for me, as there'd always been. But she just stared at the floor, wringing her hands, and said nothing. Rick's voice, cold as ever, floated from the living room. "You don't live here anymore, remember? We needed the money." No apology. No shame. Just that smug smirk, like he'd finally won the war he'd been fighting with me since the day he moved in. It felt like every memory I ever had in that house had just been signed away, all for a few $100 in rent. For a moment, I almost begged, almost. But something hardened inside me. Mom, who once told me this house was our safe place, didn't reach out, didn't defend me. She let me walk out that night, suitcase dragging behind me, the cold winter air biting through my jacket as I stood at the curb waiting for a cab. The world felt smaller than ever. It wasn't just the loss of a room, it was the loss of home, of trust, of the belief that no matter how bad things got, my own mother would fight for me. I called Dad that night, voice shaking, not sure if I was more angry or heartbroken. He told me, "You're always welcome here. You have a home as long as I'm around." I could hear the sadness in his voice, too, maybe guilt for moving away, maybe regret for letting me go back into that chaos in the first place. Holidays became a new kind of lonely. I checked into cheap motels, made boxed mac and cheese in microwaves, and watched families pass by through rain-blurred windows. At school, I told friends I was just too busy to go home for Thanksgiving. My friend Jamie, always so loyal, tried to draw me out, but I retreated into myself, ashamed of the empty space where my family used to be. I started writing letters to a mom who would never read them, pouring out the ache, the frustration, the words I couldn't say aloud. "Why didn't you choose me, even just once?" I watched my phone for her calls, but they grew less and less frequent. Eventually, they stopped altogether. In time, I built new rituals. Sunday runs with Dad, late-night study sessions, even therapy, where I finally admitted that the anger I held was masking a grief I didn't have the courage to face. Each small victory, every step toward healing, felt like climbing out of a well someone else had pushed me into. But the wound lingered. I wasn't just losing a room in a house, I was losing the very idea of family, of unconditional love. I was starting over, for real this time. And as painful as it was, I realized I wasn't just a victim of betrayal, I was a survivor, forging my own path, learning not to settle for scraps of affection from people who should have cherished me most. Still, none of that made it easier when, years later, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother, her name lighting up after almost a decade. The words were blurred by desperation, regret, and, once again, a plea for help. For years of silence, healing, growth, and lingering scars ***. Silence can be deafening. After I left my mother's house for the last time, it was as if someone had turned the volume down on a part of my life, muted birthdays, muted holidays, muted calls that would never come. For years, the space between us grew wider, filled with things unsaid and wounds left open. But in that void, something else quietly took root, the slow, uncertain work of healing. I moved in with my dad, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. It was a different kind of home. Just the two of us, dancing clumsily around our hurts, figuring out a rhythm. Dad tried to fill the silence with easy laughter and Sunday morning pancakes. He'd drag me to architecture lectures, introduce me to his friends, and distract me with projects, like building a bookshelf I barely needed. He pretended it was about woodwork, but we both knew it was about building a place where I belonged. Even still, there were nights when I'd wake up, heart pounding, the ache of betrayal crashing back in. At college, I kept mostly to myself. People like Jamie, my steadfast old friend, tried to pull me back into life, inviting me to parties, late-night diner runs, even meeting his new girlfriend. But I wore my trauma like a shadow, it trailed me everywhere. Sometimes I envied my classmates with their intact families, their casual stories about home. Therapy was where I finally let the pain speak. It wasn't easy. Sitting in a warm office, facing a stranger who asked tough questions and refused to let me close the door on my past. "Why do you feel guilty?" my therapist would ask, gently but firmly. And every time, the same answer: because I left her when she needed me. Because I wanted to save myself. Together, we unraveled the knot of love and resentment, acceptance and anger. I learned that moving forward didn't mean erasing the past, but learning to live with the scars. Still, the absence of my mother was everywhere. Thanksgiving dinners were quiet affairs, just me and Dad watching reruns of football games, pretending the empty seat at the table wasn't haunted by memory. On Christmas, I sent cards to nobody. I watched families at the park with a pang, wondering what it would feel like to be part of something unbroken. Meanwhile, life happened. I made new friends, Emily from study group, who saw past my walls, and Mark, a roommate who'd become like a brother. They never pried about my family, but showed up for me in small ways: care packages during finals, inside jokes scratched on sticky notes. With them, I learned to laugh again, to trust that not everyone would walk away. Through it all, the questions never faded: should I have tried harder? Did I do the right thing by leaving, by protecting myself? Some nights, I'd draft unsent emails to my mom, debating whether forgiveness could be offered across that chasm. But the pain was still too raw, her silence, too final. Every so often, Grandma would call, asking if I wanted to come over for pie, her voice a soft thread tying me to the fragments of my childhood. I always said yes, letting her fuss over me, letting her stories fill the empty spaces left behind. And gradually, I began to feel lighter. Not healed, never fully healed, but stronger. I realized that my story wasn't just about loss. It was about survival, about carving out a sense of self-worth after betrayal. Each scar was evidence. I'd endured. I'd grown up. But even as I found my footing, the past still waited in dark corners, content to whisper reminders of all I'd lost, daring me to let go for good. I thought the years had finally put enough distance between me and my mother's shadow. I thought I'd moved on. But life has a way of testing the wounds you thought had healed. Because sometimes, just when you've started breathing easy, the past doesn't just knock, it comes barging through the door, desperate, demanding, and impossible to ignore. You never truly expect the ghosts to come calling. It started as a quiet buzz on my phone, an unknown number, late one night, flashing through the darkness of my room. For a fleeting second, I wondered if it was a wrong number, a telemarketer, or maybe Jamie making a prank call. But then the message came: "It's your mother. Please, I need your help. It's urgent." My mind froze. Years had passed in silence. Years I'd spent building a wall brick by brick, convincing myself I'd moved on, that forgiveness was overrated, that closure was a myth. But now, just 3 words from her, and every wound split right back open. Against every instinct, I called her back. Her voice, the same tremor I remembered from childhood, was laced with desperation and regret. "I wouldn't reach out if I wasn't desperate," she pleaded. "Rick and we're in trouble. We owe money. If we don't pay, we might go to jail. I need you, just this once. She wasn't just asking for money. No, she wanted me to lie, to help her deceive Rick's boss, to prey on a wound I didn't even know the man had. If you pretend you're sick, maybe he'll have mercy. Maybe he'll give us more time. When I hesitated, she cried harder, layering guilt upon every syllable. You were always my little hero. I know you're grown now, but I'm begging you. I sat there, clutching the receiver, feeling anger and grief and a sad, twisted love all at once. I thought of Dad, his unwavering support, his warnings that some bridges are better burned. I thought of all the lonely holidays, the letters I'd never sent, the sleepless nights replaying what I might have done differently. Every instinct screamed, no, but there she was, my mother. My first home. The woman who, for all her flaws, I had once loved more than anyone on earth. For a moment, I almost said yes. That's the part one haven't told anyone. I nearly betrayed the man I'd become for the woman who'd given me nothing but pain. That's how deeply these bonds run. But at the last second, I heard my therapist's words echo, you can't save someone who keeps choosing the fire. So I refused, a shaky, I'm sorry. I can't do this. She screamed, she sobbed, she called me selfish, a traitor. The weight of her disappointment felt crushing. I blocked her that night, shaking with guilt and relief both. But that wasn't the end. Days later, messages came through friends, even from my old teacher, Mrs. Carter, who'd always been close to Mom. She's a mess, they said. She feels abandoned. Dad called, having gotten his own earful. Even Rick, through a third party, tried to reason with me, promising this was the last time they'd ever need my help. The worst came when she sent a video, tears streaming, voice ragged, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. After all I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me? I watched the whole thing, paralyzed by pain and fury. But trauma brings clarity. For the first time, I saw her manipulation for what it was, a desperate act by someone who'd always put her needs above my own. The family I'd lost wasn't real. It never had been. And now, the final betrayal wasn't just her desperation, it was her willingness to use me as a pawn, no matter what it cost. Jamie and Emily tried to comfort me, offering space, distraction, even laughter. Dad, on hearing everything, simply hugged me, whispering, you did the right thing. You have nothing to be ashamed of. And slowly, I believed him. I realized, too, that closure isn't about forgiveness, it's about choosing yourself, even when it feels impossible. But the past never fades completely. My mother would text me one last time from a new number, cursing me, blaming me. I deleted the message and let the silence settle for good. I wish I could say I felt free. But what I actually felt was something else, like stepping outside into the winter air, breath cold, heart racing, uncertain of tomorrow. Yet, there was peace in the honesty, in the finality. My story wasn't over. It was just turning a page. And sometimes, after the final betrayal, is when true healing begins, asterisk. Letting go, really letting go, is nothing like I imagined. It doesn't come with a grand moment of catharsis. No soundtrack, no fireworks, no, aha, revelation. It's quieter, lonelier, but strangely honest. After that final message from my mother, the words sharp, the blame heavy, I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker in silence. I kept waiting for the anger to return, for the familiar heat in my chest, the urge to fix what couldn't be fixed. But instead, I just felt tired. Hollowed out, but not broken. For weeks, I retraced every memory, the nights I'd clung to hope, the times I'd chosen myself even when it felt like loss, the moments of regret I thought would haunt me forever. Sometimes, grief and relief tangled together so tightly I didn't know which was which. Emily called it growing pains. She'd seen her own share of family chaos, and together we laughed, cried, rebuilt. Mark, my roommate, started dragging me to trivia nights and hiking trips, little reminders that life could still surprise me. Dad never asked for details, but he knew. On quiet Sunday mornings, we'd drink coffee together. He'd point out a cardinal in the backyard, or talk about his work, gently reminding me that the world keeps spinning, even for the wounded. If tears came, he let them. If I needed silence, he filled it with music. In some ways, we both grieved what we'd lost, but we found pride in each other's survival. Sometimes, I'd slip back into old patterns, drafting unsent letters to my mother, replaying our last words, the love and disappointment tangled together. But with each passing week, the urge faded, replaced by something new, acceptance. My wounds would likely never disappear. But maybe they didn't have to. Therapy became a space for honesty, a weekly ritual where I stopped pretending and started forgiving. Not forgiving my mother, exactly, not for what she'd done. But forgiving myself for needing to walk away, for drawing a line in the sand when loyalty became self-destruction. Grandma, ever the anchor, remained, baking pies and telling family stories, reminding me that roots can grow, even after storms. On her porch, I'd let the warm sun wash over me and for a moment, feel whole. The biggest surprise? Hope. It crept in slowly, at first, just the belief that I could begin again. Eventually, it meant making room for new people, new memories, and a life outside old wounds. That's when I really started living. When I began to picture a future filled with laughter that didn't echo with old pain. Every scar tells a story. Mine will always be laced with betrayal, regret, and what-ifs. But it's also a story of choosing myself, of surviving, and finally, of healing. Letting go isn't forgetting, it's making peace with the past so you can carry only what you need into tomorrow. And if you've ever stood at the edge of heartbreak, wondering if you'll ever feel okay again, I promise, one day, you will. So tell me, how do you move forward when everything you thought you knew falls apart? Have you ever found freedom in letting go? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there, maybe even you, needs to know they're not alone. And as this chapter closes, remember, every ending, no matter how painful, makes space for a new beginning. Thank you for walking this journey with me, *. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It truly means a lot to me that you've been here on this journey. If you found the story meaningful or thought-provoking, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and brings in more people who might connect with these stories. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, experiences, or any suggestions you have, so don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Your feedback helps me create content that's better and more meaningful for all of us. Thanks again for your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.